Hello and welcome to Campus Guard's webinar, Building a Sustainable PCI Compliance Program. My name is Kathy Staples and I'm the Marketing Manager at Campus Guard. We also have Ginger Staples, Campus Guard Marketing Specialist, to monitor your questions. We are recording today's webinar, so look for an email with a link to the recording in the next couple of days. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat and we will answer as many as we can following the presentation. We want your feedback about today's content, so please complete our brief survey after the event has ended. Today, we're exploring actionable insights, tools, and strategies to help you streamline PCI compliance, reduce complexity, and create a sustainable program that evolves alongside industry standards and organizational growth. Let's get started by introducing today's presenters. Lauren Crone is a customer relationship manager at Campus Guard. Lauren supports her clients in meeting their PCI compliance requirements and addressing their IT security needs. Before joining Campus Guard, Lauren worked at Oklahoma State University as the Merchant Services and Compliance Manager within the Administrative and Finance Division. We also have Allison Zwaszka, another Campus Guard customer relationship manager. Allison is the customer's main point of contact and is responsible for coordinating the delivery of PCI compliance and IT services. And before joining Campus Guard, Allison worked at Tufts University as the PCI compliance and e-commerce manager. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Lauren and Allison.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathy. All right. So like Kathy said, Lauren and I both have firsthand experience building and maintaining PCI compliance programs, and we know that it can be a juggling act. And so we wanted to take the time to walk through a few of those successful components of building a sustainable program, such as building program awareness, centralization and collaboration, the utilization of templates and systems, as well as some non-negotiables in operational maintenance, in our opinion. So without further ado, let's talk about how to set up your PCI program for success. And the first thing we're going to do is actually ask you to help us by completing a poll.
Like a pop quiz right off the bat.
Seeing a lot of responses coming in. Appreciate that. Give everybody a few more seconds. Let me share the results with everybody.
Good results.
Yeah, competing priorities. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Not a surprise, right?
No, never. Never,
All
never.
right. Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Yeah, we appreciate you guys kind of starting off hot with a poll question, but we want to kind of get started here with program awareness. This is important, we think, for any compliance program, or even just for knowledge of something that's going on that people need to know about. So the first thing to ensure is that your merchants or departments, your leadership and support teams are not only acknowledging and know that something's going on with PCI compliance, but they're also engaging in your program. This is going to help in your efforts to bridge the gaps that you are making compliant. So a lot of time, and Alice and I's experience in complex organizations, that higher education tends to have a lot of merchants. So, and those merchants typically do not fully understand why you're making them do things. The way that they see it a lot of times is that you're stopping them from helping their customers and making their lives harder. So by fostering a higher level of understanding with your merchants, and even all levels of the organization, it's going to help you make bigger strides in meeting your compliance requirements. A lot of times we talk about how a PCI compliance program, it's not a project, it's a journey, right? You're not just marking things off of a list, it's going to be a living, breathing thing. But I think that sometimes that can take away from the fact how projects can help us to build sustainability in our compliance programs, and that they're a very necessary piece. So if you take these projects and add them all together to kind of create your journey, you can start to see how they can be helpful by updating your processes, maybe for software approvals or contracts, and making sure that your language is in those. Even upgrading to maybe P2PE devices. Also projects where you're creating structure for recurring compliance needs. Some merchants have to do scans every quarter. Everybody needs to attest every year. By including your merchants and even your leadership in these continuous tasks that are kind of a part of the full PCI compliance program, it's going to help bring that awareness and help them start to understand why they need to do all of these things. So essentially, taking your projects and putting them all together, it's almost like how days and weeks become months and years. So again, kind of how projects can add to your journey in compliance. I think it's really important that you know who and what and why you have your PCI compliance program. It's not sustainable for you to hold that information yourself, right? You need to share the wealth, share the burden, if you will, even. When you are only keeping it all to yourself and not making awareness and acknowledgement important across your campus, you're leaving a high exposure for rogue implementations or mishandling of procedures. I mean, how many times have you heard about somebody across the organization is taking payment in a non-compliant way? So it's important that we get people on board and get them to buy into the program. So first, you're going to want to get comfortable with who you are, what your program is, what you and your program do, and what you don't do. There are certain responsibilities that are going to not be on your plate. And then also just making sure that people are aware of how your program works. I think some helpful ways to do this are to meet your contacts where they are. Find out how your departments or your merchants or even leadership and support staff receive their information best. Maybe they prefer a virtual meeting, or it's better if you go to their department on campus and visit with them and help educate them that way. It's also really important to remember that compliance is a two-way street. So as your awareness grows, your program is also going to expand, and you want to make sure you set the expectations of how not only you can meet people where they are, but how your merchants and leadership can also meet them where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So to Lauren's point of knowing kind of what your program is, who you are, your role, I say get good at your elevator pitch, right? Explaining all of those components, quick, to the point, concise, but also giving it the gravity and the value it deserves. And so while it's important to be visible with your merchant departments and leadership, like she mentioned, I kind of want to talk about those other departments, maybe like the supporting actors, if you will, within your organization. Oftentimes we see organization silos taking place. So I'm referring to maybe procurement, internal audit, budget office, or even accounts receivable. And so when each group or department has their own workflow, we see duplicated effort, delays, or inefficiencies because those groups don't work together in a shared process as well. And so questions that you might ask yourself is, do you know who they are and how their process works? And then do they understand you and your process, right? Is there a way to break up those organization silos to reduce the duplication of effort and build in some efficiency? Are there shared data points that can be streamlined, right? I'm thinking about maybe the reviewing of a third-party service provider where we've got a few departments involved. Can we map out a workflow where we understand who has what data points or what dependencies are involved in order to keep things a little bit more streamlined? And so, meeting those departments, explaining the why behind your tasks is helpful. The elevator pitch establishes those interdepartmental relationships, but explaining what you're trying to accomplish is just as important. Maintaining visibility, not just when you need something, right? And so I know that in our poll, we said one of the biggest challenges is competing priorities. Sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? And so if you continue to maintain visibility with the various levels and groups within your organization, your name, the program will kind of be front of mind for them. One idea that I used to do, feel free to take this and run with it, is I would join various groups, their staff department meetings, a few times a year, right? Just introduce myself, remind them of my process, where I need their help, what they can expect from me. And pro tip, bring donuts. Just trust me on that. It does help with program awareness. They will not be upset about it. All right. We've got another poll for you.
And that one's tough.
It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, for sure.
A few more seconds. Share the results with you. Ooh. All right. Not quite surprising that both are equally challenging.
Right.
We do.
Yeah.
We agree and understand that. There's no wrong answer with that one, of course. So,
yeah.
All right.
For
Thanks,
sure.
everybody.
So let's go ahead and talk about centralization and collaboration a little bit. For me, the big C in centralization is collaboration. Each person is only one person, and fully compliant programs cannot rely on only one single person. There has to be other pieces to that puzzle. So even when full centralization isn't possible, every little bit of centralization that you're able to add to your program is going to help making it a sustainable program. Finding where the majority of compliance lives, knowing that there's going to be multiple pieces to this puzzle, requires input from areas and elevations in complex environments. So I like to work through compliance with centralization in mind, and start with the trifecta of scope. So we've all heard people, processes, and technology. I think that this is a really great place to start and to, kind of start working your way through how you can centralize and collaborate in your organization for your program with these three things in mind. Personally, I enjoy working with people. I like to build relationships with people and departments. I can admit I never took anybody donuts, and I do see that was not the best call for me. I think that would have worked a lot better and maybe have made a quicker effort in some cases. But by building these relationships, I am ensuring that my merchants, my departments, that they know who I am and who they can turn to for questions. Because a lot of times they don't know where to even start. And so if they at least know my name, then they can reach out to me. So having said that, there is no I in program. Collaborating with departments or subject matter experts that maybe have a superpower that's a little bit different from yours. This will help you to push through plateaus and even barriers. I know that a lot of times PCI is kind of mainly managed from a treasury or finance side of the house. You're going to need to be in contact with IT. So maybe based on your structuring, you make a single contact with the networking personnel. And then you've got somebody to ask your networking questions to. Or you can take a one-to-many type of collaborative approach that is going to look more like a PCI team, where you're going to get a lot of people in the room with a lot of different backgrounds that you can look at solutions and issues and everything in between from many different lenses. This is going to essentially end up helping you create progress quicker, not only because you might have some elevation in that room that can give you approvals that you need, but will also result in an issue that universities commonly see, where there's overlap in compliance programs like PCI and GLBA. So whether, maybe you're helping them meet something or they're helping you meet something, there's also kind of another layer of that where maybe there's a technology that will be useful for both of you. But you might not know that unless you've created those relationships, gotten those people in the room and had those conversations. Please keep in mind that whenever you are including other people into your compliance programs, that establishing roles and responsibilities is going to be very important, because you're going to want to create clarity. All of my words are missing today, especially when people across different departments are managing responsibilities. This is going to help to build program alignment, to create buy-in, and ensure that there's shared accountability for all of those people involved. A couple tools that I used to like to use for this would be decision trees. So determining where the responsibility actually lies based on, the pieces of the puzzle. Maybe workflows and responsibility matrix are also really great for those relationships that you have with your third-party service providers, so that you know who's covering which compliance efforts. And then finally, the payment menus is kind of a technology piece when looking at the trifecta of scope. You can reduce your PCI burden by baking centralization in and creating clarity for your program by offering essentially a menu of payment acceptance options that are compliant and approved by your organization. This is also going to create less of a hassle for when new opportunities are, presented of potential methods to take payments, which will in turn create less decision fatigue on what needs to be done and who needs to be doing it, because you already have that list of these are our options for payment terminals. These are our options for gateways. I'm sorry, that doesn't work. Let's work together and find a different solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And so while Lauren talked about kind of the people and the technology of the trifecta, I'm going to talk about process, because that's kind of where I prefer to focus. And so if security and compliance is a tree, I see it that PCI DSS is just a branch of that tree, right? Other compliance like GLBA, HIPAA, all of those, they're just branches, right? Because at its core, it's all trying to protect data. We just do it a little bit differently each time. And so even if the staff or the teams can't be centralized, I'm looking for a way to centralize a process. If there's one place or one system where you have less time wasted looking for the right person, updating things, that's a win, in my opinion, right? And that builds in that sustainability. A few examples that you could leverage from your organization's core process already are things like incident response plan. Piggyback on, maybe your organization has a large incident response plan, and you just need to add in kind of the flavor of PCI to that, whether that be a few keywords, a clause of that decision tree and how it targets the incident response team, things of that nature. But your buy-in from the end user is already going to be a little bit better because they already know a centralized process of reporting an incident. Another place that you might be able to find some centralization is in training enrollment. Sometimes HR might have the ability to code certain job or roles within your organizations and tag them with specific job requirement trainings, such as like business conduct, maybe HIPAA for those who work in like a medical school or medical department. You might want to explore how you can replicate that process to tag certain roles or jobs with PCI training requirements, right? For those who are required to take the training because they're involved in payment process. User access, some organizations may have a centralized method of requesting system access or software download access, things like that. And so if there's already kind of that opportunity, can you also leverage that known process to include things like asking for e-commerce platform access or your merchant bank access, things like that for those who need to know, of course. And single source of truth. For those who need to know, if you've worked in PCI, you know that phrase is near and dear to us. But for those who need to know about your merchant environments, your inventory, who those contacts are, is there a centralized location for that data to live so that you remove any possible old copies or version control issues so that everybody has the latest, the greatest information in one place, thus reducing the effort you have to do to maintain that truth. All right. Another poll for you. Curious what the response to this will be.
I know what my response is.
A couple more seconds. Let's look at these results.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's
Love to
exciting.
see it. That is exciting.
All right.
Why is it exciting? Because I'm going to talk to you about templates today. Here's the thing. I think, even in the last 30 seconds, you're probably not going to be surprised to hear that I love templates. I think templates are a great way for sustainability to be built into your PCI program. And I know we talked about it, like compliance isn't a checklist, but the way that they can help support so many tasks and pieces of the compliance puzzle, I mean, it's just endless. So a couple ways that they can help you if you're not currently utilizing them, or if you'd like a quick refresher. First of all, they're going to help create standardization that can streamline your processes. The standardization piece is very key in centralization because there are so many different tasks that by keeping a standardized list of templates, of processes, of so many different things, it's going to help anytime that you're doing an assessment or even doing your annual review each year that is required. So another piece of templates is that it's going to essentially give something for both sides of the compliance going to do, right? I always think of like a merchant onboarding template. They will reach out and say, hey, I'd like to start taking payments. And if you have a template, you send the template and you say, great, here's the form that you need to complete. And then, we'll do next steps once I get it back. And if not, then it can kind of create some chaos. So you're going to manage their expectations by making sure that they start to realize the responsibility as a merchant to take payments. So not only are they actively participating in creating the merchant, but then they're going to get the training and start to understand what it takes to actually take payments, reconcile those payments, all the other things that nobody thinks about whenever you start taking payments. And they're going to be able to start understanding and owning their responsibility in this process. Also, if you have a list of templates somewhere, it's going to allow you to quickly locate items, and it's going to help you figure out where you're at in your process. Again, I know, like, it's not a checklist, but if you know that you haven't gotten a form back, or you've gotten that form back, but it's missing information, so you've sent it back, you can quickly determine where you're at on your side of the coin and what they still need to do so that you can help support them. This is going to help reduce the mental load that is required of those involved in the PCI compliance process, because essentially you're not recreating the wheel time after time after time, and you're not looking for, a form you sent 5 months ago to somebody. Because let's be honest, most people who do PCI compliance are not like applying for that. It's more of like an other duties as assigned option. So since PCI programs are overseen by one or few, that means it's rare for a lot of us that it's our full job. So templates are also going to benefit the program and its administrators by providing guidance, and it's going to help reduce errors, which are going to be obviously important in compliance. But also as you're working through your internal processes to get the right information. And it's not easy or necessarily fun to do an initial implementation of templates and changing processes. You're always going to have somebody that's going to push back on you a little bit and say, that's not the way that we used to do things. But by staying consistent and gentle reminders, getting that support from your leadership, it's going to really pay off in the long run. I kind of already touched on the assessment or like an audit aspect, but if you've got some templates that are all put together, then the burden of hunting down all of this information and ensuring that you're getting the right information consistently is going to be a lot easier, and it's going to reduce variations, kind of like Allison mentioned, multiple versions of the same document. So in the end, templates will ideally provide your PCI program with some uniform structure, creating some sustainability, and allow essentially those that are working directly with the program to quickly triage requests and provide responses to common questions or issues that arise. Also, this element essentially of self-service for departments wishing to start engaging with your program, it's going to allow for that to kind of be taken care of on its own, so that you and anybody else that's working with the program as other duties as assigned might be able to spend their time on other projects or program needs and things from those other roles. So kind of overall, templates are going to provide that foundation of sustainability that is going to allow things to move smoothly and consistently, and kind of take out the panic that tends to happen. Allison, was there anything you wanted to add on templates?
Absolutely. So here's a few of my personal favorites of templates. We already mentioned third-party reviews. Who needs to be involved, in what order, what are they going to be asking for? So if you require a HEC VAT because you're in the treasury group, will IT require the HEC VAT as well? Can you share that resource? Is there a sequence of events? Lauren already mentioned the payment menu. This allows those merchants to know their options ahead of time, creating that standardization. New merchant onboarding, kind of setting those expectations with the merchants. And again, giving a process flow, knowing what you're responsible for, what someone else is responsible for, and then department procedures. And the reason why this is my favorite template to have on hand is that you get to kind of control, if you will, what elements are within department procedures. And if we kind of left it up to every department to create those, they might come up with a lot of variety. But one that I personally think is really important and should be in everybody's procedures is how to report an incident or a suspected breach, right? And so if I have a template that outlines that this section must be a part of your department procedures, then I don't have to have that conversation each and every time on repeat. Again, building sustainability. All right, this is our last poll.
Save the best question for last. Also, probably the question a lot of people fear, you know.
I know. I feel
when the
everyone's
person with
stress
all the
level
knowledge
rising.
lives. Yeah.
Folks, a few more seconds.
Okay.
Share those results. This is very exciting to see. I expected a lot more to select the please don't make me think about it. Honestly, hi, hello. I put that in because I understand and relate to that. But exciting to see.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk through that a little bit. So on the topic of operational maintenance, I think it's important that you take a moment to think about what brings you the most pain in your program. What is stopping the program from moving forward, from being successful? And I'm going to give you a little cliffhanger here, but like, can any of it be outsourced? Because if you can take it off of your plate, then that is definitely going to be an easy win for you. But typically bottlenecks to success or pain points, you know, with a pretty good background in higher education, I know a lot of times that's funding, or even buy-in, maybe from departments or merchants. So kind of keeping those in mind, we can start to look at ways to build momentum and get easy wins. This will also help to avoid any kind of like last minute scrambles. Sometimes these are things you're already doing, right? Like how many times have you gone through an assessment or something and their response is, well, you're doing everything right, it's just not documented. So maybe creating those documents or creating systems to structure those routine tasks that we all know live in the PCI DSS. There's a lot of annual, quarterly, monthly tasks that need to be handled. So if you can create systems to help support those that are going to be recurring, then that's going to be kind of an easy win that you just kind of brain dump. You get a reminder to do it. You already have a system in place how you do it, implement and go. And then you're good until the next time it comes around. Also, managing updates or communications can sometimes be tough if you don't have a system in place. So maybe this looks like creating a Microsoft Teams group that all of the merchants are in so that you can send out quick and easy notices, reminders for device inspection logs to be sent. Or maybe you have this on an internal website. And then also email groups can be a really great tool for you to utilize for all of your merchants so that you can send out reminders to complete SAQs. Or maybe there's an update on devices that are becoming end of life and they need to start working towards getting those replaced and supported. Then we want to look at how we can fill some of these gaps for things that are just almost too painful to even look at. I know that a lot of higher education and industries have worked toward reducing their SAQs by moving from like web hosting to like e-commerce or third-party involvement and contracts to kind of take that off of their scope, right? That obviously can create some funding issues, but in the long run, how much is it really costing the university in so many different ways? There's also the training requirement in PCI DSS. That's going to take time for you to make sure that it's updated, that it's approved through all the different processes. Maybe that's easier to outsource. And maybe it needs to be very specific for your merchant. So like Campus Guard provides training courses on a hosted portal that we update that for you. And so that could be one thing off of your plate so that you can focus on other tasks. And then lastly, what about the usually pretty low cost of outsourcing some of those requirements to the merchants themselves by empowering your merchants or departments to own their own responsibility, completing their own SAQs. That's going to free up some of your time as well. So overall, it's a game of resources or a balancing act, whichever way you want to look at it. And I think that it's important to note that there isn't an award for anybody doing it all alone. It's, you know, it's a hard task. And so ensuring that it's sustainable is going to help in every aspect of your role. So if a institution has minimal resources, how do they create a sustainable program? Because outsourcing can be very expensive. I always think that providing cost benefit analysis provide a really great picture of the compliance program and where it might actually be beneficial to outsource because not only is it a cost savings, but it's a resource saving. It's people's time and effort, things that are off their plate so they can work towards other things. I think it's really important to point out that just because something can be done in-house doesn't mean it should be done in-house. It's not always cheaper that way, and it's not always done right that way either. So by doing the math and providing proof and a business justification, typically to leadership, it will help kind of make the decision easier for them. But when you're doing that, make sure that you don't forget to add any of those shared costs that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier. If there is a software that can support multiple compliance programs, then maybe you can share that cost across the department and then making it a more digestible option for your leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, the thought that Lauren was going through, I think it's worth going through those exercises once a year, right? You're required to kind of evaluate your scope once a year. That's a great time to, okay, here's my scope. What can I outsource? What can we handle? What can we change around? And so as you're building out that business as usual for the next 12 months, a few considerations. Just because it looks good on paper doesn't mean it looks good on practice, right? So things like, does fiscal year end or the beginning or the end of the semester impact certain merchants, groups, or departments more than others? And do you have a task assigned to a group during that time that is not going to be successful if you keep it at that time? Can you move things around? One common one that we see is an IT change freeze, right? And so for those who might have ASV scan requirements, pen testing requirements, things of that nature, when you go to schedule those pen tests, let's say something is found, right? Then the remediation needs to take place. Well, if you've only put your pen test right in front of an IT change freeze, then no changes in remediation may be able to take place for some time. So working with your IT department to understand what their calendar looks like, what their business as usual looks like, is another layer to make sure that your program is successful. Task avoidance is another consideration. Listen, I know that everyone's favorite part of PCI DSS is the fact that you have to test that incident response plan, right? Like everybody just looks forward to that task every year. And I know that if you're nodding and agreeing with me, you're probably lying, and that's okay. The approach I look at is, can you rip the Band-Aid off, right? Do it first in your business as usual. File your attestation, take a deep breath, and then let this be the first thing that you kind of handle for the year. One, it gives you some next steps of maybe improvements that you need to do from walking through that incident response plan. Two, it gets it out of the way. In the same breath of outsourcing, can you have someone like a QSA company, such as CampusGuard, come in and run the tabletop testing that incident response plan for you? Can they provide you scenarios to test? What can you kind of leverage there that would be driving that task avoidance, if you will? And then tasks that lag. We all know that just because the deadline is what it is, doesn't mean that that's always when it happens. So coordinating with various departments and noting which tasks continue to lag time and time again, whether that may be getting the data points needed for the ASV scans or the IP addresses and things of that nature, maybe building in and putting in a little bit of a buffer timeline there. And so all of this builds into business continuity. And so if only one person knows how the program works or how things get done, we've got problems. And so this is a not so little secret fact about me. If you know a process, I ask that you document it. And my approach is, if you need buy-in from others, bring donuts. Listen, both of those have served me well over this time. So feel free to utilize those. But factors to longevity and building that sustainability within your program, look at what is documented. Just because it's important and it's documented doesn't mean it's also regularly updated, right? If you document something and you don't review it until 3 years down the road, is it really helpful? Can that review be worked into your business as usual program? Do departments have access to know the rules of engagements, kind of like that payment menu that Lauren mentioned? What's the process to becoming a merchant? Can they look up the responsibilities that they would be signing themselves up for, right? Who has that access versus who needs to have that access? And while we're talking about those departments seeking information, is it written in a way that translates for someone who doesn't eat, sleep, and breathe PCI DSS, right? Even the word merchant is not intuitive to all. So a great place to display that payment menu or even a glossary of terms, things like that to help bridge that knowledge. And then accounting for the bounce back rate. Let's say that, to the poll question, that person leaves. What happens to the program? Can it be on? Can it, continue, but it's a struggle? And then what's the timeline for that new person to come in until they're fully up to speed? And have you accounted for that time frame? So sorry.
Little eager. So yeah, let's continue and kind of wrap things up here, recap some of the things that we've talked about. And I do want to preface this by saying, like, this is just the beginning of this conversation, right? Depending on where your program lives at, hopefully you're able to take a piece of each kind of these things to either better your program or get started on the right foot. So we've touched on awareness, how departments and merchants and even leadership need to not only acknowledge, but also engage with your program, and how you can utilize some projects, small or bigger, to build out your program and kind of bake in that sustainability. We discussed some different centralization ways that you can collaborate across your organization, because this is instrumental for your program. By creating that centralization, you want to always keep in mind the people that it's affecting, the processes it's affecting, and any technologies. And then my favorite topic, templates. Creating efficiencies, reducing manual workload for one or few staff members that are holding and carrying this compliance program. You can enable some self-service options for departments to help make it easier for them to keep track of where things are, what their responsibility is, and making sure that the program can run smoothly and maintain some sense of sustainability. And then finally, talked about some operational maintenance, how outsourcing can be a resource saving, not necessarily always a cost saving, but again, people's time is valuable. And if you've got a stack of projects against you, then it might help to outsource something so that you can make time for those other things. Also addressing business continuity concerns, including how you might structure some of the more routine tasks within PCI, how you can potentially manage updates and communication with people, and essentially just kind of preventing that last minute scramble that tends to happen. And I think with that being said, I think we're ready for some questions. Kathy, have you gotten any for us?
All right, thank you both so much for providing that really great insight. Ginger, did you want to go ahead and see if we have any questions? And for those of you who have a question, feel free to add it to the chat so we can make sure we get it answered for you.
Okay, yep, we do have a couple of questions here. First one, how do you assess the maturity of an existing PCI program? And what are the first steps to take in improving it?
I think coming into it and looking at how the current program matches up against the DSS, what are we doing for, I don't know, tampering inspections? Are we doing those? Okay, great. How well are we doing those? And especially with the new changes that have occurred for 4.0.1, a lot of updates were required from merchants and organizations to meet those requirements. I also think it's very telling on how involved the merchants are, and if they're reaching out or not reaching out. If they're not reaching out, that might mean that the program is not as mature as you might like to think it is. And you need to, as Allison said, kind of go on that road show and start, connecting with people and seeing what's going on in your organization. Allison, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and I kind of think about it in, what am I having to explain over and over and over again? What are the questions that we're seeing on repeat, whether that's from merchants, from other departments? That tells me where I'm not doing a great job communicating, or we don't have a smooth transition between the two roles. And those would be my first steps to take of improving it.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question here. How can organizations effectively collaborate between departments like IT, legal, and operations, et cetera, to build and sustain a PCI program?
So I'm going to lead with the answer of donuts, right? And
Always.
I say that and I joke, but building that relationship between the departments, that's key. Also creating a seat at the table, right? And so if you have a PCI team, do you have a seat at the table for some of those departments so that they can be aware and involved and have input into the program? Not all of them may want a seat at the table, right? And that's a whole different conversation. But allowing and offering that opportunity would be a good starting place.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that showing them what they're going to benefit from. I think it's enticing to think that, hey, if you want to join our PCI team, one, Allison always brings donuts. But two, I think we can collaborate on a couple of projects and work through them together, kind of to give you different angles again on ways to approach things, and even create some centralization across the organization rather than just, in the department.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. One more. How often should you perform tabletop exercises? And should you change up different incident response scenarios to test that?
All right, I'm
I'll
too
let
excited.
you love tabletops. Yeah, go ahead.
I really do. So how often should you perform them? I would say you're required to test your incident response plan once a year, right? That is the language out there. Once a year is good. Once a year is bare minimum. I would tell you to probably do it more often. Do it as often as you need to for all the key players to be familiar and comfortable with their role in the process. Should you change up the scenarios? Absolutely. However, if you use one scenario, you run into a roadblock and you realize, oh gosh, we have some opportunity to improve the incident response plan, make the improvements and use that same scenario again to see if those improvements actually worked, if you get past that roadblock. So there's benefit to doing repeats of scenarios. I'll also tell you, I think it's really important to come at it from different angles. One thing I like to do during that roadshow is when I met with departments or merchants, looking at their devices, I would deploy a new device, things like that. I would often have that conversation in the hall going, hey, if somebody walked up to you right now and said, hey, this piece of equipment has been tampered with, what would you do? Right? Just a casual conversation. It doesn't need to be this huge formal thing, but baking in those conversations to make it kind of normalized is key for me, in my opinion. Lauren, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the only thing I was really going to add to that is that kind of the piggyback on it doesn't have to be this full blown out thing, is go to one of your departments, maybe that you haven't seen in a while, or I like to utilize, like, if your university or college has like a wellness type center, where typically student workers are going to be like manning the desk, and go and say like, hi, I'm from Fiserv. I just need to replace this device, and see how they react. Like, that in itself is a really easy way to just test, because that is testing the training. It's testing, device update. It's testing so many little pieces, and it's a real simple conversation. From then, if they're like, yeah, go for it, you're gonna be like, can I talk to your supervisor? But just like at least start having that conversation. Kind of like those secret shoppers.
Yeah.
You can always kind of test in that way. So again, not like a huge formal thing. You want to test the true effectiveness of even the smallest things.
Okay, awesome. We do have one more question. What are the biggest challenges you see institutions face in managing their PCI program?
Organization. So I think that one of the most difficult things is it's organizing. It's herding all the cats, if you will. There's people across campus taking payments in ways they shouldn't be taking payments. There's not that single source of truth that is where everything lives. And so I think working toward organization in that regard is the hardest thing, because like I said, this isn't most people's like sole job, right? Like you were in finance doing XYZ and then they're like, oh hey, we need to be PCI compliant. This, like, you've been tasked with this now. So I think that can be a really big struggle. And there are tools and resources that can help. I know a lot of people, myself included in previous roles, have used Excel, but now we also have technologies. Campus Guard has a portal that can kind of help you out with that, as well as, you know, provide feedback for technical questions for people that, you know, need that type of support depending on how baked your compliance program is. But I think that for me, that's the biggest issue I see. Allison, what about you?
Yeah, you know, organization, but also the competing priorities, right? And I know that came up in a poll question. That was something that I always face as a challenge. And so I think that kind of goes back to who has a seat at the table. Maybe your organization can have a GRC team, a governance, risk, and compliance team that addresses PCI, but also those other security and compliance regulations, so that you bake in some easy wins for everybody for user access rules and policies, and things like that. And so then you aren't in that standalone, I have to beat the drum for the PCI program day over day over day by yourself. If you've got some, you know, some version of a team, and they are also winning, right, then that helps everybody manage both financial resources, and your people, time, and attention resources.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? I think that was it. I just wanted to say thanks again to our presenters and all of our attendees for participating in today's webinar. Just a reminder to please take our quick survey, which will launch after the webinar has ended. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions at all, and have a fantastic day. Thank you so much.